Just a reminder that any thoughts, opinions, and points of views expressed during this podcast are those of the individual and not of the Grand Lodge, a pendant body, or concordant body that individual may belong.
Welcome to Pen and Compass. I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm your host for this episode. And today, right now, we have episode 7 coming at you, season 1. And it is I can't even start to talk about the honor, the privilege, the excitement. The angels are singing. That's why I've got them in the clouds behind me. The light is shining down from heaven, and everything is transcendent and just wonderful beyond belief. Because I'm sitting here today and getting to spend time with one of my best mates. Let's see what I'll have. He's just one of my best buddies. I've known him for about 4 years now, a little over 4 years, 4.5 years going on. And we just talked the first time and we were best friends, I think, from that moment on. And so cheerio, top of the morning to you. Bob's your uncle and your cousin. We have Matthew Roger Christmas, our guest. It's like a homecoming, circle completed. The stars, like I said, the moon, the planets are aligned. And it's the Rolls Royce meets Aston Martin. We're gonna be riding in luxury at high speed. So grab your Union Jack, fly it high today. God save the King. This is my main man, my companion, Matthew Roger Christmas. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you, Jeff. That's probably the best intro I've ever had, if not over the top. And for those of you who have no idea what he was talking about with the Cheerio and the chip chip and all that stuff, I am actually an Englishman, so that's probably what he's referring to. And it's about 6:15 in the evening here in England, and I live south of London, and I work in London, so
We'll get
I'm a
into
Surrey
that.
boy.
Yep, we'll get into that for sure. So, well, very good. Well, we're going to start out and break from our tradition. Usually, we just kind of do a verbal discussion for the previous episodes, 1 through 6, of Pen and Compass. But this episode, it's going to be visually driven, at least for part 1. And I'd like to show that now. Let's see here. So we talked about we've known each other a little over 4 years. I've never shook your hand. I've never gotten the opportunity because I haven't traveled to London and you haven't been to Texas or Masonic Week in the Washington D.C. area. We see actually when I go to Masonic Week, what I usually run across a handful of guys that you know in person that are coming across to support a lot of the invitational bodies that are based in the UK. They come and visit us in the US. But going back to the kind of the genesis story of all this, it all started for me at 7 p.m. and for you as the wee hours of the morning. And right here, as you can see on the left-hand side, virtual education series for the Scottish Rite Valley out of St. Louis, Missouri. And our good companion buddy and master of the Royal Secret himself, Jacob Thompson, invited us. Somehow you and I, during lockdown, this was during COVID, got an invite, and we hop on this Zoom meeting that Jacob was hosting. And he starts talking about the Royal Arch of Solomon, which is something that is just fascinating and is just the craziest thing for you and I. We really love anything Royal Arch and anything kind of in that part of Freemasonry. And so Jacob finishes going through the degree, which is he kind of went through the different symbols and the different actions of the degree and what's happening physically and symbolically in the degree and metaphorically, allegorically, all those type of things, metaphysically. Did a great job of that. And then after about 35, 40 minutes, he opens it up to questions. And all of a sudden, I see this guy, and I've got it there's about 40 plus people on this meeting, and all of a sudden I see this guy. I've got set up on speaker on my Zoom, and he's just talking. He's trying to stay awake so late at night, and he's so excited about the subject matter, and he's just going. And I'm like, wow, that guy's from England. Wow, he loves the Royal Arch just as much as I. Wow, I can tell that he's a member of the Royal Arch. I can just see that he's a York Rite Mason as well as having the ancient and accepted rite. And so I start messaging and chatting with him on the side during the Zoom meeting. And basically I was like, hey, after this, if you'd like to become Facebook friends, and we'll chat on Messenger. And he's like, brilliant, perfect, wonderful. And so tell me your side of it, Matthew. How did you get to this date and
Yeah,
time?
well, I'd seen it on Facebook, I think, and I knew it was a terrible time for me. It was middle of the early hours of the morning. But it was certainly, I mean, these all the various Zooms during lockdown, don't know about you, Jeff, but they kept me going in what was a very miserable time, being locked away. But Masonic education was great. But I was particularly drawn to this one because, of course, in my opinion, it's wrongly named. It's in England under the ancient accepted rite. We call it the Royal Arch of Enoch, which was the original name. And it was later changed to the Royal Arch of Solomon. And of course, in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, they call it Master of the Ninth Arch. But for me, it's an important degree because it is a reference to Enoch, one of the almost forgotten patriarchs of English Freemasonry. So I was very interested, having read the transcriptions of the Royal Arch of Enoch available in England and other manuscripts, as to why it had been moved to being Solomonic, which it isn't by origin, and I'm interested in that whole way in which the Southern Masonic jurisdiction degrees have been completely rewritten by Albert Pike and everything else. And please don't condemn me, friendly Americans, but I think he made a terrible job of the Intercepted Right. I'm not a fan of Albert Pike in any way at all. I think he overcomplicated things, he changed things, and he was following an agenda. But that's my particular opinion. We can talk about that some other time. But I think it was key for me, Jeff, because you were also clearly really interested in the concepts of the Royal Arch, the Archway, in whatever sort of forms it's known. And of course, if you're an English Mason under United Grand Lodge of England, which also includes Wales, it doesn't include Ireland or Scotland, which are separate Grand Lodges, the other two ancient Grand Lodges in the world. The Royal Arch is very important to us. It isn't just another order or something that you might think about joining. It's part of pure ancient Freemasonry, the three degrees, including the Royal Arch, as was promulgated by the Duke of Sussex, the Grand Master in 1813. So Royal Arch Masonry is incredibly important. And actually, in England, it's going through a huge revival, and many more brethren are joining the Royal Arch in England. It's often the first of the degrees, if you like, beyond the craft which they join. But I'm particularly interested in some of the earlier origins of Freemasonry before the Hiram legend and everything else sort of got in the
We're gonna,
way.
in perfect segue. We're gonna go there right now. So this segment is all about kind of not really a true comparison. We're gonna back off on the North American comparisons to the U.S. or Canada, and the way that we do what we would call and style the York Rite over here. We're going to amazingly focus on what the English system is, the Scottish, the Irish systems, the UK, the things based in Britain, and those type of things on this, because we'll maybe come back and talk about that. But that's not the point. That's not the point of Pen and Compass. We discuss what people's opinions are. We discuss what the people's interpretations are, and not just give a bunch of long drawn out things that you could read on the internet. But so speaking of that, you've done, starting with 4 years ago during COVID, you became very active because we all had not much else to do. We were sheltered at home, and we were sitting there, and you did a great job. And I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but even getting to watch afterwards, or sometimes I got to watch live because I would stay up or get up early in the morning and join y'all online. Even on a weekday or something, because we really didn't have anything going on, couldn't go to work. Couldn't. My job is outside sales, so I've got to go see people at their places of business. Anyway, so you taught me a lot, and I think you took those things of the Royal Arch and the Mark Master and the Fellowcraft and you started giving me these. You kind of gave me the cairns, the stones along the way to guide the path, and those little sign guideposts. And I want you to kind of go into that. And we're showing right now the YouTube channel that you've put together, which is brilliant, and would highly recommend any Freemason, whether you're interested in joining the York Rite or not. It's a little bit complicated. You can't just go join some of the things he's going to be talking about today directly. You have to be invited. But with that, talk about kind of the things that you're saying are the kind of the pretext to the Solomonic Hiramic legends as we practice it in the U.S.
Well, I see I haven't got very many subscribers. I ought to do a few more videos, but it hasn't really been time since lockdown. I've been so busy. I'm very interested in both Noah, Patriarch Noah, and the Patriarch Enoch, and the place which they used to have in English Freemasonry, and which has, for various reasons, some of which are clear and some of which are definitely not clear, they have been somewhat pushed out, if not almost eradicated. And there are snatches of them around in various of the different degrees that are extant in English Freemasonry, and of course are also in American Freemasonry. The degrees you can join beyond the Blue Lodge, and there's also other particular figures I'm very interested in, like Melchizedek, who may or may not have been the son of Shem, the son of Noah, as well, and his role, his important role, and how these things, how these individuals, I think, shaped some of the early Masonic ritual, and how for various good reasons, and I think some not so good reasons, not particularly praiseworthy reasons, they were sort of edged out, really, because I think they were becoming forgotten. They're very much, the patriarchs are part of an ancient tradition. And even in the 18th and the 19th century, when Masonic ritual was being written in huge numbers of degrees and orders, they were far less well known. And they've been pushed to the margins, really, of the more esoteric degrees in Freemasonry, which is I think, a pity, as I don't think they themselves are particularly difficult to appreciate. And I think Masons would gain a great deal. But just as you'll see if you were to watch some of the videos, there is a theory that Noah was the original in the legend of the third degree, in terms of him being raised on the 5 points of fellowship by his sons, using grips with which we are familiar, and ultimately on the 5 points of fellowship. And he was pushed out.
Let me go to that slide. Let me jump over there. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah, and was pushed out because the Hiram legend, and of course Hiram Abiff is barely features in the Bible compared to Noah, barely features at all, and nothing about his death. But the story that was emerging about Hiram's death had all the kind of things that made it attractive. He was murdered, for example. There's intrigue. Then there's all the post-Hiramic degrees of revenge and everything else. And but the same concepts of whom Hiram might represent were certainly seen as whom Noah might represent. And of course, Noah is often seen as the second Adam, and both of them as precursors of a future person.
So why would you say he's the second Adam? I know, but kind of for our listeners and people partaking in this discussion, how would you say he's and I love those parallels and to find those things, biblical text as well as Masonic.
Yeah, well, of course, Adam is the first man, and it's from him that mankind emerges and is created, and it is, of course, Noah who saves mankind from the deluge by constructing the ark on God's command, and it is Noah who, therefore, if you like, is the second vehicle of man being created again. So there's that, but he's also, I mean, I think also you could argue that But Noah is also a precursor of Solomon, in that Noah constructs an ark, which in the Royal Ark Mariner ritual is in England is referred to as the place of safety, and it's a divine construction. Whereas, and of course, using the working tools that are there, you show them there, and of course, also Solomon is the creator of a divinely inspired building. So, in some ways, in the same way that we might regard the tabernacle as a precursor of the temple, well, so is the ark as well.
Yeah, there's some
And there are
Noah,
all sorts of other things there.
There's some Moses and Aaron sprinkled in there too, in the interim,
Yes, yeah,
in between. Yeah,
and it's interesting, and I mean, they have early origins in similarity, but the Order of Free Gardeners as well, which is starts in around 1716. That's debatable, but hugely was built on and elaborated after that. The three master gardeners are also Adam, Noah, and Solomon, and that they are the three. They are the three gardeners in the same way that perhaps in early Freemasonry, I think you would have seen Noah, Adam and Noah, and of course Solomon as the three great builders in some ways, and of course so that's there. Now in England we have this degree, which is also now part of the Allied Masonic degrees in various forms in the USA, of the fraternity of Royal Ark Mariner, and this is the story of Noah and the building of the Ark as well. It happens to be my favourite degree in Freemasonry. It is a genuine initiatory rite, and I know Jeff, you're a self-confessed initiatory lover. You love initiation rites. This is not just many orders are not particularly initiatory. They just give you some secrets and some new insights. But the in this degree, you are blind, you are hoodwinked, you're led in there, you are taken around the room, and then light is restored, and you are pointed in various directions of contemplation. Um, and it is it's a very simple degree. The regalia is very simple. There's no real rank structure in English Freemasonry. That's actually the sash there is not from English Freemasonry. That's from Australian Freemasonry and other orders. In England, it's a collar and not a sash. Although I have got one of those sashes because I'm in an order, a non-Masonic order that has a similar story, called Guild Companions of the Ark. But again, it hasn't got a hierarchy, because that hierarchy in England is taken by the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons. You have to become an Ark Mariner, you have to be a Mark Mason. And although there's no ritual connection whatsoever, the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons took control of the degree of the Royal Ark Mariner. And again, in somewhat dubious circumstances, actually. But the highlight of that is that when you join the Mariners, you don't have the hierarchy, and actually you can be the most senior of all the Royal Ark Mariners in England and Wales, His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent, and his Royal Ark Mariner regalia does not look very different from a newly elevated brother in the Royal Ark Mariner, and I like that simplicity.
I didn't put on here. I think the difference usually is triangles versus the rosettes.
Yeah, that's basically it. Not there's also collarettes too, but it's all very similar. There's not a lot of badges added. There's not badges added and that sort of thing. So and I like that. I'm not an enormous fan of complex regalias. I think the differences in regalia, for instance, certainly in England and Wales, in the blue lodges, as you call them, the craft lodges, as we call them, I think they tend to distinguish between people rather than make us all look the same, which is, after all we are. We're all initiates, we're all brethren together. And I think the Royal Ark Mariner and one or two other degrees in Freemasonry understand that very clearly, and there is not a lot of difference between you. Not to say I don't like dressing up. I mean, we all enjoy that, I think, Masons. But
Didn't Solomon say there's a time and place for everything?
there is indeed a time and place for everything.
You know,
But
and I'm
I
gonna
think
jump. Yeah, the dress.
rank is only the guinea stamp, isn't it? And I think that yeah, I
It
think
should be the
there.
vehicle, not. It should be the vehicle to what the work you're engaged in and not the destination.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely.
So yeah,
But
kind
it's a
of funny.
beautiful degree. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful degree. It's a beautiful ceremony, and it has very, very, I think, long origins. Even though the current Royal Ark Mariner degree is not as old as some people think it is, but it's still been around for several hundred years. So it's not new by any
Yeah.
circumstances.
So I put in the image on the right of this particular part of the PowerPoint. This is something that would be more used outside of the U.S. and outside of invitational body, or outside of the structure that we have in the U.S. To help those that are either pursuing being a master mason in a grand jurisdiction of a Blue Lodge, or our Royal Arch Mason, and they are going to be blessed, privileged, honored to be invited into the Allied Masonic Degrees Grand Council of the United States of America at a local level. Here is kind of the connection for you, and here's where kind of that bridge across the Atlantic kind of comes from the symbolic source. And if you're looking for, usually it's in the what's called the ninth class or the last class of symbols that are presented to you. A lot of times, if you look at old tracing boards or the very elaborate colonial and then pioneer, kind of the 1800s, early 1900s, whenever people would basically bring their tracing board to do a degree and would have the arc and the anchor, they're both kind of very similar in that kind of safe harbor, safety, God's protection, and those type of things that can extend in multiple different ways into different religions and denominations across the whole spiritual and religious spectrum. So it's
And I think
a very core thing going back, because it's like I said, it's pretty much the next big thing after the story in Genesis of creation is the deluge, and it's even talked about with columns and things like that in the Blue Lodge too.
yeah, absolutely. And I think your point about tracing boards having many different images on them, once tracing boards began to be manufactured as opposed to be merely drawn on the floor, and people brought their tracing board with them. Many early tracing boards do have a variety of Masonic symbols from a variety of different degrees. The Royal Ark Mariner has a tracing board that was sort of rediscovered in the 50s, actually, 1950s, but it looks very similar to a warrant from the 1790s, 1796, which has on it many different symbols, including actually, apart from the Noah symbols of Enoch and his pillars and his arches, and also symbols from other degrees which would have been worked. And in England, there was one of the two factions that formed the United Grand Lodge in 1813 was the Ancients Masonic Lodge, the Athol Lodge, Grand Lodge, that was a breakaway. And the reason they broke away was they wanted to practice more degrees, and some of their very early tracing boards and things had a variety of different degrees on them. And I think that's probably where this comes from in in American Masonry, having more than one story depicted on a series of images, because as we know, Masonry is interconnected. It's a continual journey. It's a continual finding out of new things. It's a lovely connection here. You've got the anchor, the symbol of hope, one of the three great
And that's
faith,
in
hope, and charity
yeah,
there.
that's in a later slide too when we get into the Grand Lodge of England room, the UG, the main meeting. Yeah, I've put that in there, so you can we'll make sure we point that out. So just kind of a little editor's note here. I am doing this PowerPoint. I'm trying to. We didn't rehearse what we were talking about, so if I go like this and like that, I apologize if that's weirding you out as you're watching this on YouTube. I'm doing my best to follow along and play catch up with what my buddy is trying to describe, because he's brilliant, and I just want to capture all that as much as we can on this recording. So moving forward, this kind of let's talk about the dove a little bit, because that kind of interweaves back into the Blue Lodge in certain grand jurisdictions, not in Texas, but in others. The the actual deacons
Yeah.
use that as a symbol, and I think also in some of the English, Irish, and Scottish Blue Lodge imagery for the officers' jewels and their stations and anything else like that. So
Yeah,
maybe
in virtue, I haven't ever been to an English lodge that doesn't have some form of a dove as either the symbol on the wand of the two deacons or as the jewel which hangs from their collar. And it's again another suggestion, perhaps, as to the fact that this dove, which comes from the Noah story, shows that the Noah story was perhaps quite deeply entrenched in early Masonry. The other one, of course, is the password that leads from the second to the third degree, and the character of whom this password talks about is a close relative of Noah. And you have to wonder, why are they talking about this chap in between the second and the third degree? He's
well,
nothing
he
whatsoever
was
to
a kind of a
do with the
blacksmith, isn't he?
Solomonic. He's got nothing to do with the Solomonic legend at all,
Right.
the Solomonic or Hieratic legend at all. He's a much earlier. He's again a precursor, and you find these things, and even in some of the signs, particularly in the third degree, you see things that are clearly, and some of the words of the third degree, which have some very clear reference to the Noah story. For those interested, there's something called the Graham manuscript from 1726, which was probably an aid memoir of a chap called Thomas Graham, who's described as a master of Yorkshire lodges. It looks like his crib notes, and this tells the Noah story very clearly within the context of what we today call the third degree. And I think things like the dove clearly, are part of that. But it's not proven. It's just a theory. But it is surprising that as the deacons are in many ways guides, I suppose the dove is appropriate. The dove guides Noah to the dry land, but also you might expect them to have a caduceus or something like that as a messengers, but they don't. They have doves, and that is curious. And
Yeah,
I think it shows
feeding,
that
feeding,
masonry evolves all the time. It's
feeding
the
back
evolution
into
of
the
science.
yeah, feeding back into the more Greco-Roman Hermes and Mercury symbolism.
Yeah, that's
That
what
would
you'd
be
expect.
and well, that this trip, by the way, Rodney's on here with us, folks. Rodney McGillvary. He's in the background being. I'm not inviting you out yet, Rodney, but just make a note of that. That if you want to talk about the dove versus
Yeah.
Mercury, Hermes type symbolism.
Yeah,
We'll
some very early English lodges do have the Mercury as their wands. British Lodge number 8, for instance, has a golden a golden Mercury figure at the top of each wand, but the deacons do actually, still have the dove. So there are, there's no clear blueprint. Masonry evolves and it changes, and people put their own interpretations on. Not least, of course, manufacturers of regalia and manufacturers of the paraphernalia used in lodges. So, and we could expect that, and it will continue to evolve, I'm sure.
So let's just talk about you on a personal level. I know I have seen rainbows since you and I engaged in conversation those many years ago, and I was already struck and know the story of Noah from my Christian church background is very brought to me as one of the main stories in my early childhood. When I see the rainbow, it changes my day as I'm driving. A lot of times I'm driving, in Texas somewhere, Oklahoma, or different states, and whenever that storms come through and maybe kind of rocked your day a little bit and been a little bit of a nuisance, and then the rainbow comes out and you're driving along and it's in that sky. What does that do inside of your heart? What does that
The
do
same
inside of
thing.
your
It's
soul?
Yeah, it's a symbol of hope. It's a symbol of a new covenant with God, with mankind. It's always a cheerful symbol. And yeah, I mean, apart from can one find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the great Irish story where the leprechauns have hidden it, and I've tried, and you can't get there, alas. But it's always good, and a double rainbow is especially fantastic. And
Beat me to it.
occasionally you manage to capture it on your phone, you capture that picture, and it's always a delight to see it. Because yeah, but it's a very clear symbol, in the mason in masonry of that, and in the Bible, of course. And don't forget that in some of the very early depictions and the very early manuscripts, we're not always sure when they refer to an arch, whether they're referring to a stone arch or a rainbow. And there, there is some confusion in some of the very early descriptions of the Royal Arch degree, and arches being carried in procession through towns and villages, whether it was in fact an arch or was in fact a rainbow depicted. So again, I think you're seeing different symbols, and they're not always clear which one they're referring to.
Wow, brethren, companions, folks, that's why I invited him to have this chat today, because wow, I just love listening to him and learning from him. Thank you for that. That blows my mind and gives me a lot of new things to think about. How that, and even as you're sitting there talking about that, and I'm looking at the image on the right, because it shows a half circle, and how many things. And also, we won't go into it too deep, but the Order of Secret Monitor, going back here, which is a part of the AMD in the U.S. Down here, this is on the bottom right. It has two guys around a shield and a crown on it, and it's kind of a darkish burgundy color. That actually has a lot of feed over also from the fellow craft, the use of the Forest of Lebanon, the kind of tying in with Joppa and all those things, the Mark and the Order of Secret Monitor. All this is kind of woven together. And when you're privileged to have been initiated into those and then have a full plain English ritual script to it, what a blessing to sit there and be able to study that and just soak up all that interpretation and have all that material to do that. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you're right. I think it's difficult for the English Welsh Mason under UGLE, because of course UGLE governs the 3 degrees of the craft and the Royal Arch, and then you have to go to different bodies, but you can't simply sit. I know it's not simple. Join the York Rite and do a whole lot of degrees. Most, as you can see here, there are from
Let me
that
go down
chart.
to yeah. This
Yeah.
is this is the structure in the U.S. for on the right for the
Yeah.
Allied Masonic degrees, and then English.
Whereas if you go back to the English chart, you have to join a whole variety of different sovereign bodies, all of which, require a whole set of new fees and everything else, and a whole set of new regalia in order to do to do your research through the different orders. There's
And,
no kind of English rite of Freemasonry. Not that I'd want one, but there isn't any clear way in which you just carry on moving through. You have to decide, and it's often very difficult as a new Mason. Where do you go next? And you rely inevitably on someone telling you they really like the mark, or they're really, really keen on the Secret Monitor, let's say, or they're really keen on Knights Templar, and you rely on them to do that. And so your path is often, it's not always a logical path, and you can make lots of errors, because you can join an order that isn't really what you're looking for. Whereas I think the American system, which has its problems as well, does suggest that you do either the Scottish Rite or the York Rite, or you can do both, but they're both in themselves full initiatory rites. Whereas in England, you have to decide, do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? Or do I do this one? And it's very complicated. And people, they might take a long time to come to a degree which they could otherwise join much more quickly. And that's a shame.
and some
Interestingly, yeah, they're
there's
not all
about
on there, of course. That
yeah,
chart hasn't got all of them by any means.
yeah. This is yeah. We're not trying to go in and dissect everything, but a lot of that is there. And I think in
Yeah.
the U.S. you see it as rights that house multiple systematic degree systems and that are progressive and things like just like the arrows going upward here from the bottom of this image. But we have, I would say, in my mind, from the Blue Lodge as a Master Mason, you can join the chapter of the council and then the commandery, which is what we would refer to as the York Rite. You have the four bodies of the ancient and Scottish Rite, fourth through the 32nd degree in the southern and northern Masonic jurisdictions. You can go directly into the, I'll probably mess it up if I try to say the whole thing, but the ancient noble order of the shrine. And then there is also kind of an alternative to that where you can join what's called the grotto. And so those are the things that you can turn around, just like you petitioned Craft Masonry, the Blue Lodge. You can turn around and say, hey, I want to be a member of this. They say, great, we're going to vote on you, which is usually kind of, once you're a Master Mason, it's kind of an administrative thing. There's very few times that you're going to get rejected once you've already proven yourself in kind of a fraternal way. And then move forward. Here's how much it costs to join. Here's how much the annual dues are. This is when we meet. And kind of some of those logistical things. But a lot of what you see on the screen here, once you become a Royal Arch Mason, which we're going to show that here in a minute, only then after you're invited into the Allied Masonic degrees, you're invited to a Council of Knight Masons, you're invited to an Order of the Red Cross of Constantine, you're invited into the Royal Order of Scotland, you're invited into the SRICF. This shows the SRIA. The Red Branch of Erie is a part of the Allied Masonic degrees. The Order of St. Thomas of Acon is in the U.S., and it's predicated on some things in an invitational body. What else is on here? The Order of Scarlet Cord is inside of the Allied Masonic degrees. The Order of Secret Monitor is inside of that. Mark Master Masons go along with the Royal Arch system, and the Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priest is invitational on top of that. I think the only ones that we're missing here on this chart that are both in England or the UK and the US are the operatives. I think that's the only one. I think that's the only one outside of that.
Yeah, and a very, very important society of Freemasons, the operatives. I always feel it's in England it's not given the credit it deserves. It's actually a very, very interesting and complicated initiatory system, and I think it's often seen as a little. I think the outsiders often see the operatives as a little bit sort of what it would be like if we were really stonemasons. It's nothing like that at all. It's actually extremely esoteric in terms of the idea of living stones, and I'm a devotee of the operatives, and I always think it deserves much more attention than it gets. It's a small order, and it's administered separately from its own organisation, and I think that has held it back a bit. But it's certainly growing again now in England. It seems to be on a really good. It's governed by the first Grand Master Mason's exceptional, and I think it's really pushing itself forward.
So speaking about dress code, it's one of the few Masonic orders groups that in the state of Texas you'll see Texans wearing morning suits, not ascots, but morning suits, and that's the proper attire there. So let's move on a little bit into something that is accessible for especially a lot of North American Freemasons that might be watching this. I think you and I would both describe the Mark Master degree as an extension or the next part. And I know there's a Mark Man and some other things that we could explore on this part of the discussion. But this is where you really become a fellowcraft. The Mark Master is where you've mastered those initial middle level operative skills and that you're transitioning on. And I think the way that we a lot of times when we confer it individually, and this is from my experience and kind of a Texan centric experience, or when we do it in a festival style where it's the first degree of several that you're going to take over one day or over 2 Saturdays or something like that in the chapter and the council, I think it just kind of really doesn't, there's so much there. It's kind of like the fellowcraft degree itself. It's so deep, and it's so like kind of just giving you just a little bitty eyedropper of the symbolism. And it's so massive to everything else going on.
Yeah, I mean, in England, it's the biggest order outside the Craft and the Royal Arch, and deservedly so, I think. I think it's often rather badly advertised as being the so-called friendly degree. I never understood why people call it that. It's a super degree. I mean, it's got, you're quite right, Jeff. It is without wanting, I don't think it is quite as people say. I'm not sure it is the extension of the second, but it's very much a fellow craft degree. Although, of course, in England, you've got to
Well,
be a
it,
master
it
mason to do it. But it's
right.
it's very much a fellow craft degree. It has got some really good humour in it, in that the candidate under the English system is properly set up for a
Oh,
form.
yeah.
But it's got some beautiful, as well as that, which is in itself a good lesson. It has some fantastic ritual at the end, and the symbolism is absolutely beautiful. And again, much more. You can look into it, way beyond the kind of material or moral level, at the kind of mystical, esoteric level. Interestingly, in the operatives, the kind of teachings, if you want to call them that, of the mark degree are woven into the operative degree structure, and it very much is put in its, if you like, its rightful place. But no, the mark is splendid, and I've really enjoyed both. Well, a long time ago now, being the candidate, but also in doing all the different jobs in a mark lodge. I think it's a great joy to be one of the three overseers, because they have they have great fun, and they're great characters, and they have a great rapport with the candidates. So I think it's splendid. But I'm always at the end of it. There's a piece of ritual at the very end, which always knocks me sideways. It is beautiful. It's quite succinct as well. It's a bit like the Gettysburg Address, very, very profound things said in about 10 sentences, as opposed to a huge, great Masonic charge. They deliver this wonderful piece of ritual at the end, which really makes you think. So yeah, the mark is well worth doing, and it is a clear, it's clearly operative in its origin as well, in the ways that other parts of Freemasonry are clearly not operative in origin. So yeah, most
It's definitely
recommended.
not a walk around the room, stop 8 times, get told a speech here and there, get kind of patted on the shoulder, patted on the head, and
Yeah.
move back out. And okay, you paid your fee, and congratulations. It's definitely
Yeah,
not.
you're really involved as the candidate. You're very
Yeah,
much involved. Of course, you're not
yeah.
blindfolded either, so you see it all. And it's probably, even beyond the three craft degrees and the Royal Arch, it's probably the one where you are most actively involved all the way through. And you say you're not just given a lot of charges given to you have to stand there and listen to when you're a little bit gobsmacked, a bit exhausted after all. But yes, it's splendid. I think some people think the mark's a bit light and they don't take it terribly seriously, and I think that's a shame, because it's got a bit of everything in it, actually. Yeah, but
I
it's
think
very
the
profound.
reason I think the reason that even our common heritage here of the Mark Master, the Royal Arch, the Royal and Select Masters, the Cryptic Council, the Commandery, the Knights Templar, and even for us in the Scottish Rite, once you're a Master Mason, and outside of the kind of the craft lodge, a lot of times those York Rite, Scottish Rite gatherings, invitational bodies, everybody's a very seasoned Mason. It's a very kind of everybody's with the program, and I think we just enjoy each other's company so much that there is some lightheartedness in it, and sometimes I can see where people get a little taken aback with that, or they have issue with that. Sometimes it can be a little overcooked, just like a a bun in the oven, or bread. It can be a little bit crusty and everything. But for the most part, the Mark Master degree, if you know what you're looking for in the kind of what each officer does in a Blue Lodge as your closing, opening, in all three of their degrees, you're going to find direct homage to that. in the major officers, and then in a lot of the verbiage. And I won't say exactly where, but it's and it's really fun for me to be in a Blue Lodge after a newly made Master Mason is there, and I'll give them some little hand sign that I'm not obviously going to do here, and their eyes will just go like this, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I remember that scene. I see that now. Now, whoa, wait a minute. You mean I've been listening to this for 3 years as a Master Mason, or 10 years, or 6 months, or whatever?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was right there in sight. You just didn't have the next step yet."
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's what we're trying to encourage here. We're not saying that
yeah.
if you're not a Master Mason, then you're not doing Freemasonry right. That's the last thing I want to come off across.
No, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. But you can be a very, very good and thoughtful Freemason without having done the mark. But of course, as you've got on the screen there, it has got the keystone, and the keystone is of huge importance. So, both in terms of the simple acts and the kind of the material of building, but also, of course, in the kind of the moral and the mystical interpretations. So, the keystone is vital.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep on going here. Let's go down some slides. So this brings us to the Royal Arch. Um,
Oh,
I don't know if we have enough tape in the machine to talk about all the things that you and I could talk about with the Royal Arch. Just the main story of Zerubbabel and that portion of the Bible and all the things that come along with it. Kind of set it up a little bit in the U.S. The thing that I love about the Royal Arch among different states is grand jurisdictions is how different it is, and how I feel like, you've been talking about the Noah Freemasonry, because I can never say that. Please say that term for me. Noahshite?
oh, no, Noahite, Noahite
Noahkite. Thank
Mason.
you. Noahkite. I always start to say shite instead of kite.
Don't forget
Um,
Anderson in the night in his 1738 constitution, the second constitution, says we are all Noahida. We're all
yeah,
sons of Noah. So yeah.
yeah. And so for me, the Royal Arch kind of takes what we've been talking about in the Noahkite stuff with the Adam, the second Adam, and brings us down into the rest of the patriarchal system, and does a amazing job of doing this high speed drive through of the Old Testament, and kind of the chronology and the history of it, and kind of that whole genealogy that happens and that weaves through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, into Moses, Aaron, and then eventually we find Zerubbabel, and we find Joshua, we find Ezra, we find Nehemiah. Help me out here. Who else am I? There's another prophet that I'm missing. Who's
Haggai. You've left Haggai out.
Haggai? Yeah, Haggai. He's actually the one we represent in Texas as our scribe.
Yeah.
So there's so much we could talk about in
Mm.
Texas. The Royal Arch is almost a 3 hour degree. I don't want to break it down in this. Maybe sometime we can come back and do just kind of a dedicated segment to that. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about?
Well, Jeff, you ought to be a Mason under UGLE because your love of the Royal Arch would absolutely have you up there with the Grand Master and the Program Master and the way we're moving in England to really stressing the Royal Arch. It's hugely important. And even though, as people who study the Bible will know, that Ezra and Nehemiah, for instance, the two lectors, the two scribes were not contemporaneous, and they, it's all been slightly muddled a bit. But and in Ireland, of course, they have different names for the three principals. They're not Zerubbabel, um, and they're not Haggai, etc. They're not those.
They're actually repairing Solomon's temple.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I mean, it's a hugely important piece of ritual. It's hugely important, and certainly, I would always say, and it's not just because of my position in English Masonry, for what it's worth, but it's because I think it's true. I think the Royal Arch is the must-have after you have joined the craft. I think it is illogical not to do it next, because of its when you're ready to do it, because of its importance. Those of you maybe will know that Zerubbabel is described as God's signet ring. And those of you who are Knight Masons and have been through the chair of a council of Knight Masons will absolutely understand that reference. But it's hugely important,
What
understanding
and those
beyond
of us that
yourself.
are those of us that are have a president, have a senate, have a house of representatives, have a governor. We don't really understand the signet ring because we don't have that kind of monarchy. Tell us about how that kind of would work.
Well,
We have
the
it, but we
signet,
don't.
the signet ring obviously has your crest on it, and it is you use it to seal things with, and it was often given to you in ancient times by your overlord as a means by which you could seal documents on his behalf or using his authority. So Zerubbabel is not just anybody descended from royal lineage. He's marked out by God clearly, and of course his job is to rebuild the temple to God's service. I think probably I know, Jeff, that you've lectured on the veils, and if I could change one thing in English Freemasonry, I would bring the veils back. It still worked in the province of Bristol, which is one of the provinces under the United Grand Lodge of England. The city and county of Bristol, they still work it, and one or two very old chapters still work it, and it is demonstrated by various. Certainly in London, it's demonstrated at least once a year by various chapters. I think it's a great pity that the veils has gone. My Royal Arch chapter works a working called Perfect, the Perfect ceremonies, and they still have references to the veils, but we're not permitted to use them anymore. It was got rid of a long time ago,
Well,
but it is in most chapters. But it's terribly important,
well,
and
I would
I
love
would I
to.
would bring those back.
I would love to offer up that I've done things like that
Mhm.
for like the Grand Royal Arch Chapter of Massachusetts. I did a private kind of series for them of the passwords of the veils
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
use, and I can teach on the banners, and like I have a whole like system with
Yeah,
PowerPoint.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
about 9 hours, 10 hours. It's about like watching all the Lord of the Rings movies, director's cuts. If you
I
really
mean,
want to give me license
we
to do
talk
that,
about the ensigns and the banners, but the veils are no longer used
well,
or
if you
depicted in
wanted
our chapters.
if you wanted to set up online virtual
Mm,
opportunities to do that in a private setting
that'd
to
be
where
great.
we could discuss those things, I would jump at the chance.
Well, be careful what you wish for. But I mean, I've seen the
No,
veils several times,
no,
and of course they in the cryptic rite, the Order of Royal and Select Masters, the sort of sixth and the final degree that can be conferred upon you, that's known as Excellent Master. It is in fact the veils, slightly different from the Royal Arch veils, but so and that of course was brought in relatively recently to English Freemasonry from the United States. So
well,
it's good that
it's
it's still
actually
there, available to
Scotland
people.
to AMD back to the UK, or
England, not the
yeah,
UK,
sorry,
England. But
excuse
so yeah,
me.
we are the veils are very important, and it's a shame because it makes that very clear progress of the patriarchs, Noah onwards, so Moses onwards, and of course Moses is and Abraham. Sorry, excuse me, Moses and Adam are both referred to in the Royal Arch, and that the veils is really important in making that clear. But it's just one of those things that was taken out a long time ago, hundreds of years ago in English masonry, alas. But yeah, the Royal Arch is very splendid. As I said at the beginning, I mean, I think the Royal Arch legend has an earlier form, that of the legend of the Royal Arch of Enoch, a similar sort of issue to do with subterranean vaults and secrets being deposited therein. Again, I've done no work on this except just starting really. Why it is that there is the Enoch legend of the vault, and there is the Solomonic legend of the vault. As far as we know, neither of them are biblical in the strict Bible sense. But it's interesting that these ideas of hidden subterranean chambers. Again, it's that link again between these ancient patriarchs and the more modern, 18th, 19th century Masonic ritual, which has moved it away from these patriarchs books to very clearly all centered around Solomon's temple, which is, of course, the most widely understood symbol of Freemasonry. So it's
And
interesting.
I think for me, 4 or 5 years ago, as I was really so, I was 20 years into being a Royal Arch Mason. Had seen the degree multiple times, um, but didn't really maybe just didn't have the passion for it that I have.
Mhm.
And whenever through a few things that I was pursuing in my personal life, in my Masonic kind of career, I decided that I was really going to just open up the Texas Ritual, page one, and just read it like a book. Not worry about my part or what I'm studying, or try to write something and just kind of cherry pick it. And it was it was a transformation. Like
Yeah.
I think someone on here would say it would be a transmutation. I became a different person after that, and a different there was a different side to my being, and a lot of it had to do with I just got the opportunity. It's a Sunday when we're recording this, and I just said in a Bible study at my Southern Baptist church, and the guy who led it's 80 years old. He'll be a guest eventually, Rick Weintraub, and he grew up in a Jewish household and has, in his later years, after he met his wife 50 something years ago, 60 something years ago, converted to Christianity. And under him, I have a different perspective of the Old Testament than maybe a lot of Christians do. And so he has, through just thinking that he's just always been my mentor, been my teacher, been my kind of rabbi to a sense. I started looking at the Royal Arch, and I would sit in chapter meetings with the opening ceremony. We would go through the passwords of the veil, the men, the veils, and then the station of the veils, and the concept of the veils. And then I started looking at the symbolism behind it. Overwhelmed. The tabernacle is a symbol, and the tabernacle of the way that kind of feeds into Christianity, and this is not our home. We're and then in like John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, right? And those kind of concepts of where this is a temporary state. The tabernacle, not the temple with its stuff, and its opportunity to try to secure a place, a certain place in your heart for God's Spirit to dwell in this symbolic temple, the tabernacle. It's pick everything up and move it to where God tells you to be next.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a lesson in that, practically, pragmatically, humanistically, but also on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
That all of us could, and it started feeding on me in a very positive way. So I just kept feeding it.
I think your idea of transmutation, I know Rodney would approve as an
That's
alchemical.
why I put that in
I
there.
thought so as someone in alchemy, but it is an alchemical journey, Freemasonry, in many ways, turning base metal into gold. That's the aim, one of the aims, surely. But I think you're right. I think one of the, and it's interesting you say you started to read the ritual from sort of cover to cover, and I think a lot of people don't do that. They do inevitably look at the bit they've got to do. I'm in a guard. I need to read the inner guard bit, and of course you can't understand the masonry just the parts alone. You have to read the whole text. You've got to watch the whole drama. You've got to take part in all the parts of the drama over time in order to appreciate it. And every time you see it or take part again, many, many, many years later, you'll gain new insights from it. But I think it is important to read the rituals themselves, in full. And one of my particular interests, I mean, I'm really interested in Masonic ritual, generally, and I like to read as many rituals as I can, but also early forms of the rituals because you find out so many things that have either been omitted by accident or deliberately, and you look at all those things. So, for instance, the words in the Royal Arch that were changed. And all that sort of thing. So I think it's really important not just to sort of cherry pick the bit you've got to learn for next Thursday, and and obviously you need time and the headspace to do it, but you do need to read the whole thing as often as possible. And occasionally it's really nice. It doesn't happen very often where I turn up to a unit meeting and I'm not asked to do something. It's really nice just to sit there and just watch it and listen and take it all in rather than just focusing on one particular part or not. So that's a real luxury if you've got a big enough lodge that you can do that sometimes and not have to always be delivering education or delivering, part of the ceremony. Just to listen and to reflect on it is really important.
I
But
think
never have the book out when you're doing it. You either watch it and participate that way, or you read it at home. I never understand Masons who go to a lodge meeting and sit in the back row and they've got the ritual book open. I don't understand what they're doing.
that's kind of like I'll say if that's permissible for some of us, it's hitting on we're already trying to just be calmed down enough. Our what we call hyperactivity when people were our age, it's got different labels now, but those of us who can't sit still and be quiet, sometimes it helps to add to the vibe in the room to where if we're reading that, then we're not like fidgeting around. Let's put that away. So I think there's some
I think it can be off-putting to the master in the chair to have people with the books
depends
open.
on it depends on the setting.
Apart from
It depends
perhaps
on
the official prompter who needs it, but that's just we'll differ on many things. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
So this image right here pops up from time to time. This is what a lot of these would be American AMD relative. Describe this Pentagon for us.
These are the 5 degrees of the Allied Masonic degrees in England. There have been 6 in the past when the Secret Monitor was part of it, but is now an independent order. There are 5 degrees. So the admission degree is that of St. Lawrence the Martyr, which, although having a Christian name, is not a Christian degree. The Allied Masonic degrees is open to people of all faiths. You've then got a variety of fantastic degrees. I mean, I'm hugely passionate about the Allied. The 5 degrees are not related. They're just protected by one sovereign body. They're all different. And so you've got here, you've got a fantastic grade, as you can see here, with the gold triangle with the black inlay and the Hebrew characters, which is the Grand Titles of Solomon degree, which is a connection to one of the degrees in the cryptic rite and one of the degrees in the ancient accepted rite. But it's a fantastic degree. I was very fortunate. I was recently working in my mother allied degree council, and I took the part of Solomon, and it was wonderful to do it again. I haven't done it for many years. That was great. You've then got in the green there, you've got.
Well, I was gonna talk about the Grand Towers of Solomon.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's also an extension of the 3rd degree, the Master Mason's degree, the Hiramic legend. Also, it's kind of almost from a different angle. The Grand.
It's definitely a Solomonic degree. It's got this wonderful debate between Solomon, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff, which is I really like that. I think it's a better degree than the other 2 because it has this debate between the 3 principles about what to do with the situation that's emerged in the secret vault, and Solomon realizes the error of his ways and his rashness. And I think that's a hugely and certainly the obligation in the English version does talk about admitting your fault, which is something that it's a good lesson. It's a very dramatic degree, one of the most dramatic actually in English Freemasonry, I think. But it is but it's got this lovely dialogue which I really enjoyed doing with my other 2, if you like, lead principles.
And that might be the select master's degree for us in the cryptic council.
Yes, it is. It is very similar to this. We have the same, but there's not that same dialogue in the cryptic in England. There's not a dialogue. Solomon makes a decision and he does it, whereas here he listens to Hiram Abiff and he listens to Hiram, King of Tyre, and they advise him, which is the only time it happens, I think, pretty much in all the degrees.
A little bit more cryptic counsel, let's say. Well, yeah, justice, moderation, mercy, those type of things are talked about in that. For us, the Grand Towers of Solomon is more of what was going through the minds of the 12 that didn't, without giving away too much information, that didn't act upon their anger at the building of the temple during the Master Masons of the 3rd degree. And so that's kind of the story of from their point of view, and kind of this like the collection of craftsmen, especially those of them that were of the Jewish kingdom and under Solomon's kind of authority, with Hiram Abiff involved in that. where the Master's attire, which I don't know if y'all have that degree or not. That's
No,
kind of
we don't.
a North
No, we don't.
Carolinian degree, North Carolina founded degree, which is part of our allied Masonic degrees. And
I've read it, but we don't have it. No, not
right,
here. No.
right, and that's more from the Phoenician side of it, of what's going on, kind of in that pivotal time whenever that great tragedy, mythological tragedy happens. So what would you like to talk about else on this image, sir?
Well, you've got in the green, you've got the Red Cross of Babylon degree, which is again a hugely important degree, and it is a simple version of the 3 degrees of Knight Masonry. The story of Zerubbabel and Cyrus and Darius, the 2 kings, and the return to rebuild the temple, and it's a wonderful. It's got so many depth, so many layers to it. And the bridge in it can represent all sorts of things. It's a complicated degree, very confusing because there's no red cross involved in it at all. The naming of these degrees has changed a lot. But it's known as the Red Cross of Babylon, and it's again a splendid degree, a precursor really to the Royal Arch degree. And hugely important. And those of you who are not Knight Masons, this is, as you probably are aware, is an Irish set of degrees. They do it in full and really beautifully, actually. So
and we have in our Knight Masons councils, we have the pure Irish, and that's one of my selling points to Royal Arch Masons. It's that I feel like are worthy of an invitation. Is here's an opportunity, especially if they have the background like I do, and have some Irish ancestry and heritage. Here's an opportunity to get the pure ritual straight from Ireland without it kind of going through this nebulous colonies coming over back and forth. We know, and we can one of the few things we can trace how this got to us in the in America, and it is very much it. So we take the Order of the Red Cross as part of the 3 commandery orders.
that's right. That's
And
right.
so it kind of all weaves back together, and this is kind of that same concept. I'm going to throw out something that this is the way he terms it. I'm sure you're very aware of who Robert G. Davis, Bob Davis is from Oklahoma, and his great writings in the Southern Jurisdiction, Scottish Rite, and then other things he does. He's always lecturing. Great guy, and about the time of COVID, and he did a lot of podcast interviews 3, 4, 5 years ago, and he came up with this thing where I think that's whenever I started listening to him. It may have been before this, but he came up with this concept of you've got your craft lodge or blue lodge, the first 3 degrees, which is the starting point and kind of the pivotal point. You take the chapter and the council, and you also take the Scottish Rite, and you can add in the commandery depending on your religious, spiritual background. He says, by the time you get through all that, you finally have enough information to understand what's going on in the entered apprentice degree. And it's kind of like that circle, right? Like it has a starting point and an ending point, but it doesn't. And so there's a concept of how all this kind of works together. So moving along.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in England, we have, again, the Council of Knight Masons comes directly from Ireland. It's governed from Ireland, not from England. So all our Knight Masons councils answer direct to Dublin. And of course, it's seen as it is the pinnacle of Irish Masonry. And I think those of us who are Knight Masons, relatively few in England and Wales, really, it's growing quite quickly now. But it's hugely valued. It's beautiful ritual, very different from English Freemasonry, but
yeah, and
it's
for
fantastic.
for those of us in a priory, a preceptory, a commandery, there's a lot of parallel and mirror times that you find, oh, we've got this guy over here and get this guy, this officer. So what about with this white triangle?
Knights of Constantinople. This is a very unusual degree. It's probably one of the only 2 genuine side degrees that is still worked, i.e. a degree that was for which you were taken on one side after a lodge meeting, before a lodge meeting had it conferred on you. It's a relatively simple degree. It's quite uproarious sometimes. It's got a simple lesson, but it's a lovely lesson, and I suppose it's the ritualistically it's the least profound of the five of them, but it's a lovely degree, and it's yeah, it'll always bring a smile to your face, and a clear moral lesson in your heart. So of humility, and to banish pride. It's a lovely degree. It's got there's no reference to any of the other Constantine degrees that exist in Masonry at all. I mean, it could be called anything really, but it's a nice little, relatively light-hearted degree. But like any good light-hearted degree, it's got a good message as well. So I like it a lot. It's very short as well, short but
I
nice.
think also, I think though, attaching Constantine's kind of legend and him kind of being that pivotal person that's kind of taking the the Holy Roman Empire into more of a democracy, or kind of a democratic republic type way of that's what it's supposed to be kind of communicating.
Yeah.
It's funny to me now that we're talking about it that he I usually get cast as one of the common people. I don't know why. I don't know why they
We're
would
all the common people. Don't forget that. We're all the
why
common
they
people.
would grab someone next to the common people. I don't understand that.
No, we're all the
But
common people.
usually,
Don't
yeah,
forget that.
that's my rule.
But
Yeah, we
it's a
are.
nice
So
degree. The fifth degree is again hugely important. It's probably, along with Red Cross of Babylon, the other really ritualistically important degree, the Holy Order of Grand High Priest, which is again one of the only times in which Melchizedek appears in Masonry. It's a complex degree involving an anointing. It may well have been the installation ceremony for one of the principals, even the first principal in a Royal Arch chapter in various parts of the country. But again, it's a splendid degree. It's
so
possibly two degrees spliced together actually, but again, it's I'm very fortunate in our council that I'm a member of. Our secretary does an absolutely extraordinary job as
yeah.
Melchizedek. He's
So
absolutely splendid.
those times that I would love for you to come over and experience things would be we have the order of high priesthood that is conferred
Mm.
on the state level. There's usually like one of those kind of grand councils in each state, grand chapters, and so actually someone that you know has gone through the chair in Texas. That would be Brad Billings. He's been the lead person of that. The cool thing in Texas, there's a practical side to it. So it's a chair degree. Once you're high priest, most excellent high priest, you're a past high priest. You can come to it's usually Waco. It's on a Friday afternoon after our first day of meetings and sessions for Grand Royal Arch Chapter, and about 4:30 you can come in and pay your money, which is usually around $35 or so, and get the degree. Go through the ceremony, and it's very moving. I think we do the Order of Silver Trowel usually after it, which is a little bit more dramatic. And a lot of times people, whenever I'm getting their post experience, they talk about the one that's a little bit more dramatic, and I'm like, you miss so much. Let me get you your if they didn't give you a written script, let me get that to you and just go read that. And
Mhm.
there's a major lesson in there about how to behave every day, about
Yeah.
how to set your heart align with the Ten Commandments and align with a lot of other things. And so it's kind of one of those things where you have to go through and do certain things and be in that position of receiving that and be there at the right time. And it's a shame that it can't be a little bit more commonplace that people get to gain those lessons. And that's sometimes whenever we have those invitational type situations, or these kind of, you have to go through these layers to get there. It's kind of almost sad to me in a sense that more people that I think are worthy of it, more of my companions, can't experience that and get that. And obviously I'm obligated not to really reveal
Yeah.
those things to them. So,
Yeah.
what? Okay, so we've talked about all this. So let's go into let's actually before we go into this, this is part one for Pen and Compass with Matthew Roger Christmas, episode 7. We look forward to taking a quick break, and you can find this recording on part 2, episode 7, the next portion. Forward to having you back. Thanks for being with us.
Hey everybody, Robert Johnson here. Just really excited to share with you that I'm going to be at the San Antonio Esoteric Summit. I'm excited to be presenting on Esoterics 101. What is that? Well, it's really designed to be a beginning look at the deeper mysteries within Freemasonry and that span across multiple schools of wisdom. It's ideal for lodges that need exposure to the concept of esoteric masonry or individual brothers who want to take that first step into understanding a little bit more about those kind of philosophical ideas within the craft. Schools of wisdom, hidden symbolism, and hints at an ultimate revelation are going to be explored, and I'm looking forward to sharing all that with you again at the San Antonio Esoteric Summit. Thank you, and I hope to see you there.